Well, hello and welcome to this, and planned on doing videos before I did this one, but didn't happen, and for that reason I'm going to talk about a lot of things. So yes, this video, if you haven't already seen the time, I would imagine, unless I'm managed to talk about everything I want to talk about, well, it can be fairly long. I shouldn't say I haven't had time to do all the videos I wanted to do. It's more of just, I don't know, I just haven't gotten around to it, I guess, which is kind of sad because it doesn't take me that long. I mean, and everybody knows I don't edit my videos. I pretty much do them, put them on, there we go. So it's kind of sad that I just haven't just gotten myself to do this. But one of the things, before I get to the Elimination Chamber and the review, which I'll get to later on, that's going to be later, because I want to talk about this now, because I feel like if I don't talk about it now, I'm just not going to talk about it, and I'm going to rush through it if I put it at the end of the video. So one of the things I wanted to do starting at the beginning of the year, which was almost 3 months ago now, was I wanted to start reviewing wrestling that was out there, and mainly television shows that I didn't really see other people reviewing. Not that other people weren't reviewing them, because I'm sure some people were, but just me doing it, just because I usually get a little bit more viewership, and me showing people that yes, if you look, like I've said since I've been on here, for good pro wrestling, you can find it out there. Unfortunately, 90% of the people here on YouTube, 90% of probably people that would even consider themselves pro wrestling fans, if pro wrestling was cool again, would pretty much judge pro wrestling by Raw, and only by Raw, because WWE being the major show, Raw being, even WWE pretty much pushes it as the major show instead of Smackdown. Forget that Smackdown is usually better, but that's beside the point. We'll get to that. And that is, that if that show sucks, then all pro wrestling sucks, and that's the way it is. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people on here that do this, and that's a broken record with me saying that time and time again, but it's kind of the truth. But there is other wrestling out there, and I was basically going to do the same thing that LV has been doing, if any of you have seen his videos, where he's talked about, or he's basically reviewed, let's see, Ring of Honor, Ring King, which I'm going to talk about, FCW, and Dragon Gate Infinity, which also I want to talk about. And he's basically been reviewing all of those shows. And I was going to do the same thing, except not with FCW. Instead, I was going to do the NWA Hollywood show, and just haven't done it, to be honest. Just haven't gotten around to reviewing any of those. But I was going to review all of those things, mainly because I think all of those shows, well, I shouldn't say NWA Hollywood, because I haven't watched NWA Hollywood. I just wanted to review things that were not mainstream and show people that there was other wrestling out there, including stuff that you didn't have to pirate, that was available online. You could go and see here on YouTube, and all of that jazz, or however you needed to see it. Like I said, I do think Smackdown usually is pretty good. From what I get to see, I don't get to see it as much as I would like, but, Smackdown usually has good wrestling, good storylines. It's usually the better show out of WWE, but again, nobody watches it because, WWE, Raw is the main brand, and it really kind of irks me that you have people that will still follow pro wrestling, you have people who will still say they're pro wrestling fans, but then will turn around and say, well, wrestling sucks, WWE sucks. Well, WWE sucks. Wrestling sucks because WWE sucks, but we'll continue to watch it. And most people know I'm also a pretty big comic book fan, and comic book fans kind of do the same thing, where they continually read shit that they think is shit, but they continually read it because they've always read it, and when you try to explain to them that there's other stuff out there that they could read, they will not do it. You have people that, read every single X-Men book, no matter how bad the X-Men books are, no matter how bad they are as a collectively, no matter if there's just one or two that are good and the rest of them are all bad. Same thing with the Batman books. Maybe you'll have one or two good Batman books, but the rest of them are bad. But they'll read all the Batman books. And you tell them, there's other books out there that are better, and they'll even gripe about these bad books, saying, oh, this is so bad, I wish they, bring in a new writer, I wish they bring in a new artist, I wish they do this, or do this. But when you say, well, why don't you go read this book? If you like Batman, why don't you go read a book that's similar to Batman? If you read X-Men, maybe there's books that are similar to X-Men, or the same type of books like X-Men that maybe you would enjoy. And they won't do it. They come out with every single reason not to stop reading those books and start reading something that's better, and basically voting with their money. Because as long as you keep buying stuff, as long as you keep, doing all of those things, as long as you don't support the good stuff and you just support the bad stuff, all you're going to get is crap. That's what you're going to get. And, to me, Raw is normally horrible. I don't watch it every week. Maybe I'll watch, a go-home show before a pay-per-view, but that's, or I'll kind of follow what everyone says about it on Twitter, and if there's something I think I might like, then maybe I'll watch it. But for the most part, I usually don't watch it because I don't think it's very good. I would much rather watch, for example, Dragon Gate Infinity, which I think is very good. I wouldn't say it's in that mix of shows that I think are all kind of the top tier shows right now. To me, the wrestling on that show is probably the best for me. I know not everyone enjoys that style, but for a 1 hour show, I think it's pretty good, and I think they get the storylines across. I don't think you necessarily need to understand what they're saying to kind of get what's going on, though it does help in Dragon Gate, because Dragon Gate's a little bit more storyline driven, I would say, than the other Japanese promotions. Not that they don't have storylines, but I would say there's a little bit more going on. You kind of need to know what's going on a little bit more about what they're saying and why guys are doing things. There's that. There's Ring of Honor, of course, which I'm not going to sit here and say I think it's the best show there is, but I think it often can be just as good as those shows. Smackdown, like I said, even though it's a WWE show. And I would throw Ring of King in there, which I think is one thing about Ring of King is, to me, even with the fact that Dave Lagana has now taken over for Vince Russo, and Vince Russo is now gone, which had been rumored was going to take place at some point, but we never saw it, and then he finally took over. I think that show, Ring of King, is definitely an indictment against TNA, and that, that show doesn't even have nearly the talent that TNA normally has, and it's a much better show. It's not that the wrestling's better, but the show is more fun. The show seems more like something you want to watch. You just feel like you want to watch another episode of it. You seem like you want to see it. Keep in mind, Matt Morgan's the champion. How many Matt Morgan fans are actually out there? Probably not very many. And not that I would say he comes off as a credible champion. Not going to say he's, just, big giant draw, but at least he comes off as a credible champion. And everything they've done on that show has been very good, in my opinion. There's very little that you could really bitch about on that show. The crowd is much more exciting. Even the presentation, I would say, is even better. And so, in my opinion, when they finally said that Dave Lagana was taking over for Vince Russo, even though you still had Eric Bischoff there, which I think is a huge problem, and Pritchard, who probably isn't as big as a problem, but still, to me, not the biggest thing in the world. But if you followed my channel for any length of time, you do know that I've always been pretty high on Dave Lagana. Even when he took over for ECW, and everyone was just like, "Oh my God, he's taking over for ECW." I was still pretty high on him. When everyone bitched and complained when he, was going to be on the NWA Showcase show, I still was high on him. When he took over and started doing when he did the Ring of Honor HDNet show, I was high on him then. And I'm still high on him. And I hope that he's able to make the show better. And even though I didn't see this last week's Impact, everyone I've talked to, just about everything I've read, said that the show was actually better, and no one really expected that because no one thought there would be that big of an impact. And not that it was a bunch of big major changes, but that it was a bunch of little changes that a lot of people had been saying needed to happen for a long time. pacing, just things that happened. There wasn't as much stuff happening. Things didn't seem, I guess, as all jumbled up and mixed up. Stuff seemed to make some sort of sense. So if that's all true, and like I said, I haven't seen the show, that's a great and wonderful thing. And you know, if I keep hearing good things about it, maybe I will start watching Impact again. And you know, if it's really, really good, maybe I'll actually start reviewing TNA again. But that would be somewhere far, far down the line. But again, you know, that was one of the things that I'd planned on doing this year, and I just haven't gotten around to it. But again, you know, there is very good wrestling out there, and you know, to the point of Rinky King, it wasn't like Rinky King happened and then I heard it was, you know, this great thing, and I started watching. As soon as the tapings were done with that, and we started kind of, people who were at the tapings, I guess, started kind of releasing things and what happened, and kind of the feel of the show, and the fact that the show just was, you know, even then people were saying this felt more of like what you would think TNA would be, and it's not. So, you know, I still think that there are things within Rinky King that definitely you're kind of like striking your head when it comes to TNA, particularly since, you know, Chris Masters, who's on Rinky King, who I think should be in TNA. I know people will go, it's Chris Masters, who cares? Most of you probably never saw him on Superstars. The guy got very good, particularly for how big he was, or is, and just you know, if you can't find a room for a guy, TNA, who definitely needs bigger guys on their roster, I would say. You know, I've said I think Ring of Honor should sign him too. You know, Luke Gallows, when, you know, he's in there and he's got a biker gimmick and he comes off as another guy, you'd be like, this would be a fresh guy for TNA. Who, you know, again, I haven't watched TNA in a long time, but still, from everything I've read, everything I've heard, everything I do hear, it's pretty much the same guys, and it's a pretty stale roster. And I think if you brought in guys like that, you could freshen up the roster a little bit. So there is all of that as well. But again, you know, my point is there is wrestling out there, and you can easily see it. I know I've harped on this time and time again, but it's extremely, extremely true. And you know, like I said, LV has basically been doing what I planned on doing, which not too surprising. Me and him usually think, him and Nightmare Baller, for some weird reason, the three of us think alike on a lot of things, oddly enough, which is, if not just because they're black and I'm white, but because if you just know our backgrounds and all of that, it's kind of odd that there's a lot of similarities between us. That all said, Elimination Chamber. Yeah, this, you know, the thing about this pay-per-view is there's no reason why this pay-per-view shouldn't always be great. There's no reason why you shouldn't want to order this pay-per-view every year, because you should be guaranteed 2 great matches that are going to take up the vast majority of the show. And, you know, what we got this year was 2 good matches, I would say. Well, I would say a good match and a very good match. I wouldn't say a great match. And the match that probably everyone thought was going to be the worst match was the one that ended up probably being the better of the 2 chambers. And then a bunch of filler, which is what we usually get on this pay-per-view. But the thing that really kind of stood out for me personally was the fact that, once again, WWE has done a horrible job of building guys up. You know, you look at the Raw chamber, you had CM Punk, who they've, you know, built up well. You've got Chris Jericho, who's pretty much been over, probably more over than what the WWE would probably actually like. Then you have The Miz, who I think they've completely, you know, botched time and time again. The guy's good enough on the mic. I know he's not great in the ring, but he's good enough on the mic where he should always be over. You have R-Truth, another guy that's like that. You have Kofi, who's another guy like that. You have Dolph Ziggler. You know, you have those last 4 guys are basically who care guys, because you haven't given the fans reason to care for them. You know, particularly with Kofi and Ziggler and Truth, you've continually given them pushes and then taken the pushes away. And, you know, you continually hear the WWE say, oh, well, or people within the WWE that guys just don't know how to get over. And I've always said this. I think that's bullshit, because in the WWE, you have these guys that get over and get themselves over, and then the WWE basically takes their pushes away, and the fans get to the point where they stop believing in guys because, oh, well, the push has stopped, so nothing's ever going to happen to this guy. This guy's just going to be another guy, so why should I care? And when you keep ingraining into the fans that, eventually that's what you get, and that's what we have gotten, in my opinion. So you get a bunch of who cares stuff, and I think that's why, you just, again, wrestling's not where it should be, and that kind of sucks, because they just, yes, there's a problem in that the talent isn't there, because you have so much talent that is going to MMA for various reasons, but the talent that you have, they do a horrible, sucky job at getting over. I mean, the fact that if you look at this match, the match itself was, I would say, pretty good. The problem with it was, or very good, I would almost say, was the fact that, the last guy was Miz, who you pretty much buried on the, well, I shouldn't say buried, but you made it look like a no threat on the Raw before. I mean, come on. I mean, what they did with Jericho was inventive, I guess, and will probably lead to your match at WrestleMania, but I would hope that you could come up with, some other way to pull this off, because basically it looked like it was, CM Punk and Chris Jericho, and then once they were gone, once Jericho was gone, I was like, okay, can CM Punk basically beat all these guys? I mean, that's, there you go. Let's see what else we had. Oh, we had the comedy skits with Santino, who, I was fine with being in the SmackDown chamber, by the way, even before what happened. I think as long as you have one guy like Santino on the roster, I think that's fine. You can only have one guy like him on the roster, and you can do your comedy skits, and you can do those things. Now, he needs to be the only guy doing that, and the other guys need to be, not doing comedy skits, but that's not what we get, so, it is what it is. Then we got Beth Phoenix versus Tamina, which was okay. It wasn't anything great. Made me want to see Beth and Kong, or Karma, even more, so hopefully that is what we get at WrestleMania, which I would say with her, continually saying that, nobody can beat her and she's going to be Divas champion forever. That's what happens. So, I guess we'll see. Then we got the SmackDown chamber. Yes, the chambers did not main event this pay-per-view, which I am fine. I shouldn't say that, because I'm not really not fine with that. The Raw chamber, I still think probably should have, well, I don't know. I just think that it is what it is, I guess. But again, people were pretty much crapping on this because you had Big Show in there, which Big Show should have been in the match. You also had Great Khali, which I can understand people not wanting Khali in there. Then you had Wade Barrett, who WWE's made not look like pretty much anything. Cody Rhodes, again, they've made pretty much be, kind of, it is what it is, and he is what he is. And yeah, and then you had Santino, who most people thought wasn't going to happen, and did happen. And this, I think the booking on this was really good, though I think it started off way too slow. Really liked Wade Barrett in this, but if I've always been high on Wade Barrett. Yeah, he's not the best guy in the ring. I think he's good enough where if you have a guy that knows what he's doing in the ring, he can carry him to at least a good match, or he can at least have a good match with, and that he's good enough that if you have a great guy in the ring, or a guy that can carry him to a great match. So there was that. Khali, could do without that. And again, Cody Rhodes, I don't think the fans are really behind Cody Rhodes because, again, you haven't given them a reason to be behind Cody Rhodes. And Daniel Bryan, he's champion, and I would say he was probably over here more than he has been, which is good. But the most over guy was Santino, and I don't know if it was just the right crowd or what, but I mean, I can remember 2 years ago at WrestleMania, he was, mad over at the WrestleMania Battle Royal. I can remember You know, last year at the Royal Rumble, he was mad over. So, you know, at the end, I mean, he was so super over at the end. I mean, the fans were just going crazy for him. And I think that has to do with the fact that one reason is because he has probably the most developed character out of maybe any of these guys except Big Show. And he has probably the most over finisher, because he actually has a finisher that means something. I mean, if Santino hit John Cena with the Cobra on Raw, most people would be like, oh my god, are they actually going to let Santino win? I mean, that's what they would think. Pretty much every other finisher probably in WWE, if somebody hits somebody with it, people would be like, oh, is he going to kick out? That would be their thought. Not, oh, they're going to let Santino actually win. There's a little bit of a difference there. But Daniel Bryan won, which I'm fine with. You know, him and Sheamus at WrestleMania should be really good. If you can't do Orton, I guess maybe if Orton is over his concussion by then, maybe they'll make it to a three-way, which could actually be really good. Though, you know, I'm kind of done with three-ways at WrestleMania, to be honest. I did skip over the John Laurinaitis segment, which was... It wasn't a bad segment, but it really didn't belong on a pay-per-view. You know, if you're gonna do SHAQ, which is the thing, I would have been fine with them doing this, but instead we got this big long segment, which I guess is gonna wind up with something at WrestleMania with, you know, Laurinaitis versus I can't even think of his name now. But yeah, Teddy Long. Teddy Long. In some fashion or way. Yeah, like I care. Then we had a filler match, which we had not a unannounced match of Jack Swagger versus Justin Gabriel for the U.S. title. Didn't go very long. Was what it was, and yeah. And then we had John Cena versus KANE. Hope to God this is the end of this. There was no Zack Ryder or Eve stuff on this, though, and the thing with the Zack Ryder Eve thing is I think that if you dig through all the bullshit, there's actually a decent storyline there that could actually maybe make John Cena a little bit more heelish if you were going to turn John Cena heel, and would probably lead to a John Cena Zack Ryder feud down the line that would keep, you know, John Cena busy while you continually tried to get other guys over for John Cena to face. But you know, are we going to get that? I don't know. And, you know, I suspect we'll probably get Zack Ryder versus KANE at WrestleMania in some way, shape, or form. But, you know, hopefully, I don't know. Hopefully this was it. This is the end. No more of this. You know, because we need to get into John Cena and The Rock. And hopefully we get to that. So, there you go. As you can tell, wasn't really impressed with the pay-per-view at all. I would say it was okay for a pay-per-view. Definitely wasn't great. And, you know, Elimination Chamber pay-per-view should be great, in my opinion. And the thing is, I've seen much better wrestling on, you know, on Infinity, on Ring of Honor. Even, you know, I've seen much more fun things. I would say I had a better time watching wrestling, watching, you know, ring kicking. So, you know, there's kind of my stance on that. Like I said, we'll wait and see. After WrestleMania weekend, maybe, hopefully, after I've gone on this big long rant about wanting to do reviewing those shows, maybe I'll actually get off my ass and actually do it. So, which I hope I can do, because particularly the Dragon Gate stuff in Japan, I think is very interesting right now with the whole Blood Warriors thing seemingly falling apart, and the kind of the way that they're having that happen, I think, is kind of an interesting kind of twist. So, anyways, with that, I've rambled all long enough, so I'm out. Later.